Normandy, 6th of June 1944. The ghosts of the invasion are everywhere, and in this episode we find the remnants of the defences that once dominated this area, and we explore an infamous strongpoint. This strongpoint had the highest concentration of enemy weaponry found on any of the D-Day beaches. So welcome back to Normandy, and in this episode we will visit Sword Beach, the British landing beach on the eastern side of the D-Day lodgement, butted up against the Orne River. The area we will start with is near Le Brec, and before we go to what is arguably the most heavily defended area of all of the D-Day beaches, we're then going to look at Strongpoint 0880, codenamed the Cod Strongpoint. So we're here at Le Brec, and in a sort of square. It was here on D-Day where some amazing pictures were taken that we can still see in the buildings around us today. So the ghosts of the past have left us clues to find, and it's just a case of matching up those pictures. So let's see if I can keep this camera still. Now, this is a picture of British soldiers escorting German prisoners of war towards the beach. And from there, they would likely have been processed as prisoners of war for the remainder of the war. As World War II drew on, one thing that really characterised the Allied success was air superiority, and it was no different during the D-Day invasion of Normandy. If you're interested in World War II air battles, you too can dominate the skies by downloading Wings of Heroes, the sponsor of this video. You can take part in epic 5v5 World War II air battles where you're immersed in action-packed aerial combat, flying iconic World War II planes across a variety of thrilling game modes and locations. You can choose and customize iconic World War II planes. There is an incredible range of aircraft from World War II to choose from. You can select, upgrade and customize your planes with armor, engines and weaponry to suit your own combat style. And you get a realistic flight experience. Wings of Heroes isn't just an arcade flying game, it's a flight simulator adding depth and realism to the experience. But I'll tell you why I really love this game. The customization and leveling up is so addictive to me. There are many ways to upgrade and fine-tune your plane. Each player can create a unique strategy for dominating the skies. And the best thing for me is it doesn't take up much space on your phone. So if you'd rather dominate the skies rather than doom scroll your phone, use my gift code EXPLORER and receive a free skin for new players. Download the game now by scanning the QR code or by clicking the download link in the video description. Right next to that building, there is another timber frame building with a really interesting picture taken there. And you can see the men in full battle dress carrying their equipment. And they must have just landed on the beach, their feet still wet from the Atlantic swell. And it makes you think about all the things that they had seen. And yet with that British humour, they've still got smiles on their faces. I'm now going to head back to the first location as I've forgotten about another picture I wanted to get, and it's just between these two buildings. Quite windy today, actually. So here it is, the carriers with their wading panels still up on the sides, and the soldiers moving inland to continue the fight and try to push towards Caen. And hopefully I've lined this okay. Let me know what you think in the comments below. This is a picture that I'm not too happy with. The elevation isn't quite right. I think it was probably taken from on top of a vehicle. But you can see this building, which I have to say I always thought was like a 1960s style building. But it was actually here on D-Day, which is pretty cool. You can see the dispatch rider at the front and the carrier in the middle ground. This one's quite interesting because there is a extension on this building which sort of conceals the fact that this is the original timber building that you can see on the left. But if you look where the soldier's standing, there is a tramway, like a very small gauge railway, which used to run along the beach here, and there were stops at various points along here. That's no longer here. All the cars are parked here, so you can't see that, but hopefully we've lined this one up okay. It's quite difficult because, as you can see, there is a van parked right here where I'd like to stand and get this, but I think that's probably about as good as it's going to get. Now, this is the final then and now picture before we move on to look at the strong point. And this is another one of British soldiers making their way inland on carriers with an AVRE or an armoured vehicle Royal Engineer in the picture, complete with the petard mortar on the front. We've got more petard mortars coming up in this episode. So we've seen Le Brec and a good opportunity to find some then and now photos, but we're now going to look at Strong Point 0880, codename Strong Point COD by the British and Widerstandsnest 20 by the Germans. Now, this position was built into a gridded system of holiday homes and villas, and it was fortified by the Germans. And they also built some formidable concrete bunkers here. On the 4th of November 1943, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel became General Inspector of the Western Defences. An experienced campaigner, he had seen firsthand the power of the Allied air forces in the African desert, their ability to inflict massive destruction and, of course, disruption deep behind enemy forward areas. But he also knew that at the tactical level, they had the ability to strike mobile columns and any armour that was reinforcing forward positions. And they would do that by using ground attack aircraft. So for that reason, Rommel knew that he couldn't rely on armoured support only to react to an invasion, and therefore the defences at the beach would have to delay the landing forces for as long as possible. Now, waiting to meet the British forces landing at Queen Beach, which is the sector we're looking at, were members of the 736th Regiment of the 760th Coastal Defence Division. Now, these were not equipped for manoeuvre. They were a static division trained to defend the beaches from their strong point positions. But Rommel had probably done about as much as he could do to prepare this sector of Normandy. Remember, he didn't know where the Allies were going to land, so he had to defend everywhere. And the old adage is, when you defend everywhere, you defend nowhere. So he formed a defensive crust to delay the landing forces, with his inland coastal batteries to suppress and attrit them further. And this would allow his dispersed armoured formations, and they had to be dispersed so they wouldn't be struck by Allied aircraft, to surge forward to the point of need and to counterattack. Now, the beaches were laden with multiple belts of obstacles. Rommel placed these mostly at the high tide mark, as he envisaged them landing here rather than at low tide, and clearly he thought they would land at high tide because it meant less distance for the infantry to cover in the open. So with all of that in mind, let's look at Strong Point COD and its mass of mutually supporting trench systems, beach obstacles and minefields to the rear of the position. And this was set amongst fortified villas on this beachfront area. So I've overlaid here the bunker positions, and here you can see a Doppelschatten stand in the centre and a R677 casemate on the left of the position as we look at it. But the structures you likely haven't seen before are these bunkers that are camouflaged to look like houses or villas. They conceal murderous weaponry. And next we have these ring stand positions that house the powerful 50mm anti-armour guns. You would have seen these before, and they had one of these at the front of the position and one of these at the rear. These are devastating if they're firing into the flanks of armour and into landing craft. And finally we have the well-known Tobruk. There are at least 4 of them on this position, capable of accommodating mortars or machine guns. And in this instance, it looks as though there were machine guns at the forward positions and mortars at the rear. So it's such a beautiful day here today. It's hard to imagine what happened here. The first to land here were the DD tanks. And amongst those DD tanks was Lance Corporal Hennessy of A Squadron, 13th 18th Royal Hussars. Each side of us, other DD tanks were launching. To my right and behind me, I saw Captain Noel Denny's tank as it came down the ramp and into the sea. But behind it, I could see the large bulk of its LCT creeping forward. And in a very few minutes, the inevitable happened. The bow of the LCT struck the DD tank and forced it under the water. The tank disappeared beneath the LCT and was never seen again. Captain Denny managed to escape and was picked up, but the tank sunk and the rest of the crew was lost. There was nothing anybody could do, and it was our first casualties on D-Day. A Major A.R. Rouse of the South Flanks described the first desperate minutes of the free div landing. The boat crews had been ordered to go in at 4 knots and hit the beach hard. During the last 100 yards of the run-in, everything seemed to happen at once. Out of the haze of the smoke, underwater obstacles loomed up. We had studied them on air photographs and knew exactly what to expect, but somehow we had never realised the vertical height of them. Water fire was coming down on the sands. An 88mm gun was firing along the line of the beach, and there was continuous machine gun and rifle fire. Immediately ahead of us, a DD tank was enveloped in flames, unable to get off the beach, continued to fire its gun. The rapid enlargement of the bridgehead depended on the speed of which troops could be cleared away from the beaches, and the clearance of both beach obstacles and beach exits was therefore fundamental to the success of the landing. To achieve this, the British had developed specialist engineering equipment, or funnies, to tackle any number of these engineering issues, such as the AVRE with its flying dustbin mortar. There were tanks capable of laying a mattress on difficult terrain, and there was bundles or fascines which would be used to fill in ditches and holes and other obstacles. And finally, we have the crab or the flail tank, which is responsible for clearing lanes through minefields. Strongpoint Cod actually consisted of 20 separate strongpoints within wire obstacles and interconnected trenches. It would take the combined efforts of the East Yorks, the South Flanks, and the supporting tanks and infantry from the No. 5 Beach Group and No. 4 Commando to overwhelm the German position. We're now going to head inland and look at the depth of these defensive positions, which makes it different from other beaches such as Omaha and Utah, which are characterized by being much more of a thin defensive crust. So we've now come inland to Hilman Fortress, and the reason we've come here is just to illustrate the depth that was present at Sword Beach. So I've shown you just how difficult the fighting was at Sword Beach with all those built up villas and old holiday homes that had been fortified. Well, as the Allies came inland, they encountered positions just like this, the Hilman Fortress. And this position really is quite formidable. The defences here at this position meant that the Allies were delayed, which meant that they couldn't achieve their objective of trying to reach Caen. Now, whether they could or couldn't capture Caen is a story for another day perhaps, but the intention was certainly to bypass this position and push on towards Caen. However, this position was far more extensive and far more powerful than the Allies had realised. Okay, we're now approaching the Hilman Fortress position, and it's a really dispersed position, really quite wide, that covers a wide frontage. And the first thing that we'll do is head down through this recreated trench position and head out to the other side to get into the position. Just look at that for a field of view. So making our way over to one of the main bunkers now. I'm going to stand where the cupola is and talk to you a little bit about the field of view here and just explain some of the terrain. So we are now facing north, and you can see the coastline over there, which is no more than, I guess, 2 to 3 miles away max, no more than that. And down there is Sword Beach. This is the area that I was showing you earlier on, and in order to advance in this direction from the beaches towards Caen, which was their orders, they would have had to go past Hilman Fortress, and they tried initially to bypass it. So a tank was sent up this lane, and it was actually destroyed by an anti-tank gun which was positioned facing down the lane. They also then tried to flank it this way along this open terrain, and you can see just how difficult that would be because you'd constantly be under observation from this strong point. So they had to clear it, and so they therefore set up a forming up point down in that village there with the intention to assault this position. Now this structure is actually the command post. This is where Colonel Krug was most likely located. You can see that it's connected by zigzagging trenches that are going towards and away from the position. We're going to take these steps down in towards the position and see what's open. We're out of season, so it might not be open, but let's go and have a look. Here's again steps leading to one of those tabrooks and another machine gun position. So on some of these bunker positions they had grenade traps, And this is one right here as well, and here. So let's try it just to see if it works. Let's say I'm a British infanteer. I've got my grenade, I've pulled my pin. Grenade! And it lands straight at your feet. So within this cupola of the Tobruk, you can see ranging markers and indicators showing the spires as landmarks and the ranges to them. This was likely used for mortar calls for fire and working out the distance to enemy targets. It's really crazy to me to think of a pair of Germans stood in here, loading mortar rounds as quickly as they possibly could to be fired at the Allies as they tried to push inland. And this has obviously been repainted, but it's likely representative of exactly what was here originally. And the Suffolks initially tried to attack this position from the wood line to your front, and they breached the outer perimeter of defences using Bangalore torpedoes, but they were soon beaten back as the attack stalled under withering German fire from this position. And here we've got another guard post that guards the road coming up from the Sword Beach direction towards Hilman Fortress. So again, defenders would have been alerted and based in here waiting for the Allies to come up. And here you can see this position actually straddled the road, so anyone who was coming up this road would be met from defences on the left hand side over there where I've just shown you the main fortress position, but also positions here on the right hand side. I've never actually been inside this one. I've been here a couple of times and never visited here, so let's have a look. Oh wow. The Suffolks tried again to attack this position, and the break-in finally happened when Private James Hunter of A Company 1st Battalion, the Suffolks, stormed the position, making his way into the subterranean structure and fighting through the position with his Bren gun. He would be seriously wounded in the action, but he remained with his company until the evening before seeking medical attention. Now, during this episode, I showed you the most heavily defended position on the D-Day landing beaches. But if you'd like to see the defences at Omaha Beach or in fact Utah Beach, then why not check out the links I've got here. If you enjoyed this video, why not give it a like, subscribe to the channel and leave me a comment. I genuinely read them all and it helps the channel grow. Until next time. Once again, thank you to the sponsor of this video, Wings of Heroes. We all know that without sponsors, these videos would just not happen. Don't forget, use my gift code EXPLORER and receive a free skin for new players.